Tell the listeners about your writing and what inspired your writing and what you're trying to do on your website.
Well, I'm a contributor and one of the editors of ZenInTheCar.com, which is a political website, a political and spiritual website. We started that about 4 years ago, and it's kind of expanded into a YouTube channel and amongst other things where we discuss politics and spirituality and try to mix the two. I'm also the author of a novel called Then Came the Flood, which you can find on Amazon.com, WestbowPress.com, Barnes & Noble, any of your major bookstores. You can get that in hardback, paperback, ebook. That's because I'm a student of comparative religions and mythology. That was it's a fiction story, but it has a lot of truth in it because I don't really read fiction. People find that odd that as a fiction writer I don't read that much fiction. But I wanted to take years and years of research and put it into a story that was easily digestible, that was entertaining, that was kind of an epic, and set it in the background of the biblical account of the flood of Genesis. And so Then Came the Flood is that novel. It came out in 2013, early 2013. A lot of people know me from that novel, and the follow-up is in the works. I'm also the author of a short poetry collection called Hearts and Arrows, Halos and Horns. It's exclusively on Amazon right now and has 2 follow-ups that will be coming in the next couple months. But most people who know me, they know me from ZenInTheCar.com, and that website essentially started out, during the Ron Paul revolution. I'm a deeply spiritual person anyway, and I found the philosophy of the Constitution to be very, very spiritual, and Ron Paul was one of the only voices out there in the political world that was expressing the views on in the Constitution and not compromising. So I joined that revolution pretty early on, and it's the nature of the beast. You have to kind of get into the Republican Party, to have any effect anyway on the political system. But when me and people who were like-minded got into the political system, then we ran into a very, very huge problem in the Republican Party, especially here in the South. I'm out of Georgia. Where are you out of, Kira?
I'm in Virginia, right on the West Virginia border. Yeah.
Well, down here in Georgia, it's the Bible Belt, and whenever we got into the political world to try to become delegates for Ron Paul, we kept running into the issue of spirituality and politics. And though a lot of people who are in the Republican Party would like to say that they keep the two separated, it's just not true. Here in the Bible Belt, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to get into any type of office unless they swear an allegiance to the nation of Israel because of their interpretations of biblical prophecy and biblical scriptures. And this is an issue. It's a huge, huge problem. And all of us down here in Georgia who were in the Ron Paul revolution, we were naive to this when we first got in, but we quickly found out that this was an issue. So Zen in the Car was just a blog at the time, And it evolved into, its own website where me and a handful of other writers wanted to bridge the gap between spirituality and politics. It's already intermingled, spirituality and politics, even though people don't want to admit it, but it is. You can't tell me when you go down to the Republican Party, and anybody who believes that, we shouldn't be fighting proxy wars for Israel can't be in office is not making a connection. But what ZenOnTheCar.com kind of originated to do was to get people who were more politically minded to open up the wall between their spirituality and connect it, because it's my belief, and it's the belief of other people at Zen on the Car, that you can't have good government unless the people who are in there are spiritually minded, not religiously minded, spiritually minded. So early on, what Zen on the Car kind of sought out to do was to bring together people of different so-called faiths, and where we all could sit down in a Socratic dialogue. So there's Christians at ZenOnTheCar.com, there's atheists, there's Wiccans. I myself am a Sophian Helionostic, which isn't a religion. And we continue to welcome anybody else, of differing faiths or interpretations of spirituality, and all of us get along. And all of us are moving towards a common goal of freedom and liberty for everybody, so nobody's proselytizing. But we look at world events and politics through the lens of spirituality at ZenOnTheCar.com. And that's kind of where, that's what the site is. And after, 2 years, we decided that it was time to go ahead and, start doing some miniature documentaries and things like that. So if you go to YouTube, you can actually find our YouTube channel, which is Zen in the Car, where we also discuss, politics, the police state, spirituality, but we don't do it, we don't do it like in a teletype, boring type way. We're very humorous at ZenOnTheCar.com, and there's no sacred cow, so every issue that we deal with, we kind of deal with lightheartedly and in a fun and funny way. So you're not going to, like if you go to Zen in the Car on YouTube and click on some of our videos, you're not going to see, talking heads or, Alex Jones type people screaming at you. You're going to see people who are having fun with activism, with political activism, and showing other people how to have fun with it. Because, Ron Paul says if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And I firmly believe that, and so does everybody else that's in the car.
So tell me a little bit, when you say spiritually minded, tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
I believe, me personally, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for everybody else at ZenOnTheCar.com right now. But for me personally, I believe there's a very big distinction between religion and spirituality. Religion, in my opinion, is the root of all bloodshed, war, rape, and oppression, that's plagued this planet from the beginning. And from my viewpoint, what religion is there is this universal being. You can call it God, you can call it universe, you can call it the source, you can call it the ether, whatever you want to call it. It really doesn't matter to me. But it's there. It's neither male nor feminine. Most people, especially in the Bible Belt, you say the word God, they picture a masculine figure sitting on a throne, with a beard or whatever. When, even the Bible itself gives feminine attributes to what we call God, right? But it's this force. It's a higher spirit that we can perceive in our own unique way, and I believe it should be unique to each individual. That's spirituality. But what religion is, in my opinion, is when you're seeking this source for direct access, and you allow another person to come in between you and it, and then this person dictates to you the methodology and how you should please this thing, and that's how you get religions. You could take any, like, for example, the Catholic Church or the Mormon Church or any church that gives you a methodology without the intent. So to me, religion is methodology and it lacks the intent. The intent of being one with whatever you want to understand God as. So I sit and I could pray with Muslims, and I can pray with Christians, and I can pray with, Wiccans, because, To me, it's the intent. You may call God Allah, and I may call God, Phil, but we're talking about the same thing. Semantics has really destroyed the unity of humanity. That's all religion is semantics. It's a word game. It really, really is to me.
For you, what's the role that ceremony or ritual plays in your own discovery or expression of your own spirituality?
It's unique to me. It's I don't push any of my personals. I have an altar. I don't tell anybody else they have to have an altar. I do, altar work on my altar with certain candles and different things. But those things are unique to me. And so I'm not going to sit up here and try to form a religion and say, oh no, in order for you to do this, you have to have a green candle under the new moon, and that's just a bunch of bullocks. The oracles, if you want to understand my philosophy on how I communicate with the higher source or spirit or God or whatever, the oracles, they used to say, man, know thyself, and you will know the worlds and their gods. So, for me, certain things are very, very spiritual, whereas to other people, it's just a book or a novel or, just a habit or OCD or whatever. So to me, I believe, Romans 14 in the Bible talks about it. And man, Christians, and when I say Christians, I don't mean people who are followers of the man Yeshua the Christ. Okay? I'm talking about Orthodox Christians. They get really, really dogmatic about rituals. You have to worship on this day. You can't listen to this music. You can't look this way and all this. But anybody who really reads Romans chapter 14, in the New Testament, it clearly says that let every man decide for himself what is pleasing to God. Who are you to judge another man's servant? So ritual and ceremony is important to me personally, but then again, I can discard those rituals and ceremonies at the drop of a hat. There's no sacred cows. I like to burn incense. I like to do meditation in the morning. There's certain music I like to listen to that makes me feel closer to the higher source or God. But 2 weeks from now, that may not, make me feel so close. So I discard it, and then I go with what works. It's a unique experience. Even Christians talk about a personal relationship with the living God. But then they go on to give you a set of rules that makes it corporate. So that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, this personal relationship seems like some of those rules really take you away from having a personal relationship. And the dogma takes it out of your own experience of the sacred or of the divine, and then puts a wedge in between you and the experience of what is sacred.
Exactly, and that's by design too. Like I said, I'm a Sophian Helio-Gnostic. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a Gnostic is.
I am, yes, but please do expand on your form of Gnosticism.
You'll never find a Gnostic building a church. You'll never find a Gnostic laying out dogma or doctrine. The word Gnostic, it just means knower. People probably heard of the word agnostic. That means I don't know. A Gnostic means no, I do know. And what they know is they have experienced a personal, first-hand, experiential relationship with the divine. So they know, that ritual and ceremony is basically just a means to an end and should be discarded when it's no more useful. But essentially, Gnosticism is not a religion. I know Orthodox Christians will hate for me to say that, but it's true. Gnosticism is not a religion. It's unique to each individual practitioner. And it's the oldest faith that we know. Yeshua or Jesus, I call him Yeshua. That's just my personal preference. I'm not going to beat anybody over the head if you want to call him Jesus or Joshua or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But he himself was a practicing Gnostic. And basically what Gnosticism if I could give you a visual illustration, if you have to close your eyes and visualize a pyramid. And people who are in like the Liberty Movement, they talk about the all-seeing eye and the pyramid, and they really don't understand what it means, which it has several meanings. But for this illustration, if you could picture a pyramid with different levels, okay, and at the bottom you have, we'll talk about the Catholic Church. At the bottom you have the laity, and these are the people who are the masses, and they're ignorant for the most part, and they need somebody to interpret for them, or they believe they do, God, or how to touch God. So above them you would have the priest class, which is fewer in numbers, but they have to go to the cardinals, which is higher up on the pyramid, and they are fewer in numbers. And then eventually it gets up to the Pope, and then beyond the Pope there's the all-seeing eye, and it's basically compartmentalization. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now take that one pyramid of Catholicism, we'll say it's Catholicism, and put it into a pie, or picture a pizza, and then the slice next to it is Mormonism, and it works off the exact same system. And then beside that is Jehovah's Witnesses, and it works off the same system. And then Hinduism works off the same system, and it goes into a complete circle. So what you end up having is walls between walls of separation from people who call themselves by different faiths or identify with different faiths to keep you separated, right? Well, what a Gnostic does is they take all the walls away, and a Gnostic will connect the teachings of the Bible to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and see that they're actually saying the exact same thing with different beautiful words from different periods to different cultures. A Gnostic will take the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita with the teachings of the Quran and see the same exact thing. What organized religion does is they teach you to focus on the differences or distinctions. Gnosticism teaches you to see the interconnectivity of all of it, because there's only one God. This is true, okay? But it manifests itself in different forms, different ways. So Gnostics seek to get a greater understanding by intertwining all those teachings. And if anybody who takes an honest look, especially at the Christian Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, you'll see it saying the same thing. It's the Christ, the Krishna, born of a virgin, both of them. Walked on water, both of them. Fed the 5,000, both of them. It's telling you the same thing. And what it's actually telling you, Yeshua, or Jesus says it best, says the kingdom of heaven is within you. That all of these stories and all of these religions and all of this stuff is basically pointing you to yourself. It's pointing to the inner person, to the spirit within you. However you want to perceive God is already inside of you, but from birth we've been fooled into thinking it's outside of us. And so our consciousness gets trapped in ego, or little self, or this identity that the world system has handed to us. Whatever name is on your birth certificate. You're white, you're Christian, this is you. The world has handed you these identities. Your name is, Joseph Smith or John Smith or whatever. None of that what you chose. You accepted it. But a Gnostic casts all this to the side, and they realize the spirit is within you. And therefore, I'm not the ego. I'm not this self that you create, the world created for me. I'm completely independent of it, And that's a very, very short kind of an explanation as to what Gnosticism teaches. But thankfully, in 1947, the Nag Hammadi Library and the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and a lot of these teachings that the Catholic Church tried to suppress has started to come to light. And Gnosticism is coming back, thank God. Gnosticism, the word Gnostic was actually a slur. Anybody who's ever heard of John Lamb, if you really want somebody to really break down Gnosticism, I suggest you look up John Lash Lamb on YouTube. He's probably one of the foremost experts on the Nag Hammadi Library. But he says that the word Gnostic was a slur that the early Catholic Church used against us. We were originally called the Telestai. Right, but the word Gnostic means smart-ass know-it-all. The Catholic Church was coming along saying, this is how you worship God, and the Gnostics were like, no, it's not. You guys are trying to start a religion, But, Gnostics are, we're knowers. We don't have to have any man behind a pulpit in a dress with a particular book tell us about God because we have direct access to the Spirit. And some, especially younger Orthodox Christians might think that's heretical. But if you go to your preacher or your pastor, they'll tell you that's kind of the goal of Christianity, is that you have no mediator between you and God, that you're supposed to come into the throne room boldly. Now, they say it, but they don't practice what they preach. Gnostics practice that,
So, tell me about the Gnostic belief system or way of describing and understanding our relationship with the earth.
Oh, well, I can't tell you what the Gnostic view is because each Gnostic is different. I can tell you what mine is. My particular belief system is, if you do look into the Gnostic Gospels, there's something called the Pistis Sophia, which talks about the mother goddess. All right, most of your Orthodox Christians they don't want to talk about a feminine divine. I don't know why, but they don't. Well, I do. I have my theories as to why. But according to the Gnostic texts, if you look in Genesis, and this is where Christians really, really get confused, and a lot of them want to burn me at the stake, and some of them have tried in different ways to shut me up. But in Genesis, when it says, in the beginning, God, in Hebrew that word is Elohim, the Elohim, which is a plurality. It's more than one. And Christians will try to say, oh, well, yeah, that's the Trinity. Well, no, it's not, because in the word Elohim, you can ask anybody who speaks Hebrew, there's a feminine. So it's the gods, okay? The gods and the goddesses, okay? Now, this is what Genesis 1 says, the gods. In the beginning, the gods. And then when you get to Genesis 2 after the fall, when it says the Lord God, that's Yahweh. This is singular, and it's masculine. But most Orthodox religions they pass right over it and they don't realize it. That we're talking about two different gods. We're talking about Elohim and Yahweh. Now, when you get into the Pistis Sophia, it talks about the Elohim, or the gods and goddesses, who live in, and of course the Gnostic Gospels are exclusive to our galaxy. It doesn't really talk about, the universe as a whole. It's just, you guys have enough to worry about on your plate, so let's just worry about this one particular galaxy. But it talks about the gods and the goddesses being in galactic center, the center of the Milky Way galaxy. They're beyond time. They're fifth-dimensional entities. And Kira, I'm not sure, you would know your audience better than I would. Some shows I can talk about this stuff, and some shows they only want to talk about, the New World Order or whatever. So,
no, this is your time to talk about what you want to talk about. So I'm not going to censor you in any way about what you want to get across to my audience.
All right. Well, yeah. What the Pistis Sophia says is essentially that in the center of our galaxy you have the gods and goddesses, and they're these beings of light and creativity and love, and what they've evolved to this point. And what they like to do is they create life and they send it out into the galaxy. They write DNA codes, different strands of DNA codes, and they transmit it out into time-space to naturally evolve on its own. And it's kind of like Star Trek in that they don't stop the natural development of their creation, and they don't intervene. They kind of let their creations figure it out. Well, according to the Nag Hammadi library, Sophia was a young goddess along with another young god. His name escapes me at the moment. But Mother Goddess Sophia is the one who was responsible for the DNA code of human beings. And the text kind of reads, and I'm paraphrasing it, that she became so enamored with her creation, which is, that to me, that's normal. Anybody who has a loving mother, she became so enamored that she fell, which is a poor word, but she left Galactic Center in order to be intimate, to intimately know her creation. And this had never happened before. So what the Gnostic Gospels kind of intimate is that these gods who are responsible, for life here in this galaxy, they're not omniscient. They do make mistakes. Okay, they're malevolent, excuse me, benevolent, but they do make mistakes. And so when Sophia fell and entered into our time-space reality, she inadvertently and John Lamb Lash is probably, if you want really in-depth discussion about it, he's a good guy to listen to. He really can talk about it better than I can. But
yeah, I have read his book, Not in Her Image.
Not in His Image, yeah.
Not in His
excellent
Image,
book.
Yes.
But
and I do like the idea of this, the earth as a. I experience the earth as a living being, as a sacred being, and as me being part of that sacred being as well. So I'm just trying to figure out, how Gnosticism may have informed you in similar ways.
Well, as the Gospels go on, the Gnostic Gospel goes on, after she inadvertently created, which, is the problem of what's wrong with this system, she inadvertently created a race called the Archons, which I'm sure you're well aware of. But, long story short, she, when she got into our solar system, she kind of fell into a coma, and she metamorphosized into Earth, Gaia, Mother Earth. So we literally are standing on the mother of the mother goddess, the creator, the one responsible. So it's like we're in her womb, we're a part of her, it's a symbiotic relationship. But because she's been unconscious, it's been like she's having a dream. So we're a part of that, and the Gnostic Gospels talk about, especially during the New Age, which we're in, the Age of Aquarius, that she would start to wake up. And a lot of people here recently, especially since 2012, have been coming, they've been having a spiritual evolution very, very rapidly. And it's because Mother Earth or Gaia or Sophia is waking up. And both of us were becoming conscious of one another and becoming more minded. So Gnosticism, we teach that Mother Earth is alive. She's a conscious entity. We are a part of her. She communicates with us. We communicate with her. And this is a responsibility. It's a responsibility that like the Native Americans have known this for quite some time. Wiccans have known this for quite some time. So Gnosticism, my personal Gnosticism has because I came up in the Baptist church. All right, I was a Sunday school teacher and all that good stuff. And the idea of a feminine divinity was something that was very, very looked down upon. You didn't talk about that. That's goddess worship, right?
Right.
But when you do your research and nature starts to speak to you, nature speaks to you. It's very feminine. I especially started to take a lot of time out in nature and just listen. To the birds, to watch the trees, and you could tell it's feminine. I mean, you could tell it's feminine in nature. It creates life. The cycles of the seasons, for example, it's barren and waste, and then during the spring, when the spring hits and the light of the sun, which is masculine, hits it, all this brand new life and birds chirping and bees are flying everywhere and these beautiful colors, very, very feminine. So it wasn't just reading the Gnostic scriptures, because what the Gnostic scriptures encourage is experiential knowledge. My Bible is, what I can observe with my senses. And I'm sorry, but when I take a walk through the woods or, I go out and sit in my Zen garden and meditate, I very much feel like I'm surrounded by femininity, And, the Gnostics have a maxim of as above, so below, as within, so without. Everybody is made up of a masculine and a feminine, a yin and a yang. Your left brain, which is logic and aggression, and your right brain, which is intuition and imagination, masculine and feminine. We're all mimicking the Creator. I mean, even the Bible says we're made in God's image. Well, God's neither male nor female. It's kind of a mixture of both. So, my Gnosticism, first you get the information or the knowledge from the text, and for me, and then you experience it yourself. So, and I'm sorry, and I'm not some liberal, Al Gore type person, but we've been abusing Mother Earth. We've been abusing Mother Earth for a long, long time.
This is true. This is true. So, I too come from a comparative religion background. I got my master's degree studying mystics, and I went to the University of Creation Spirituality, which is Matthew Fox's school. And what he was doing was bringing together people of all faiths to reinvent worship. So how can, he coined the term deep ecumenism, which is ecumenism beyond the bounds of just Christian denominations, but into all religions. So I had teachers from every religion, including native teachers. And but one of the things that I learned there was that group ritual, celebration, group celebration, these are rites of passage. These are things that have been lost in our current world, and that we somehow need to bring back in order to bring some balance. So I wonder, with your sense of sort of this individual or solitary path that you're on with your spirituality, what your thoughts are about rites of passage and group celebration and group worship, and the role that plays in society and in activism as well. We can go back to that as well.
Don't get me wrong. I don't believe in like a spiritual isolationism, not at all. When I first started to explore my spirituality, typically Gnostics go through rites of passage, like you said. I didn't go to any school or anything like that, but it was almost like the Spirit was guiding me through rites of passage into every quote-unquote religion. One of the first was Hinduism. It's too long of a story to tell, but I remember when a Hindu had looked at me, and it was almost like he read my soul. He said he said to me, you see the pain and the suffering in the world, but yet you don't let it tarnish your soul. Because of you, the world will have peace. And then he bowed to me and he said, Namaste, right? And I was like, what is this guy talking about? So I had to go and look up what the word Namaste means. And essentially what it means is the divinity that is within me recognizes and bows to the divinity that is within you, right? And when I got that in my spirit, I was like, oh my God, God, if anything, is consciousness, and I'm conscious, and this other person is conscious. There's divinity in me, and there's divinity in this person. To what degree they're aware of it, I don't know. But consciousness, period, is divinity. That we're all interconnected. Every one of us are interconnected, right? We're all God experiencing itself from different vantage points, from different avatars, as Hindus would put it. So it's important to know yourself to have a direct experience with God. It's also important, the Bible talks about where two or more gathered together in my name, there I will be in the midst of them, right? So for me, it's very, very useful to talk to other people who are spiritually minded to get their particular path of spirituality, because it only acclimates mine. I mean, it only adds to my beliefs. Because, for example, if we're all God experiencing itself from different points of view, I'm limited to 34 years. 34 years on this earth, in this particular body, with certain experiences. And if I'm going to fool myself into thinking that that's all there is to know about God, then I'm out of my mind. However, somebody who was born in, say, India, who has 54 years, whatever knowledge or experience they had can only add to my understanding. That's why the Bible talks about, listen to the silver-haired men, the older people. I'm very careful when older people start talking, shut up and listen, right? because their experiences are going to add to mine. So I try to look for myself in their experiences and their stories. But as far as like group, I like to go to group meditation, because when all of us are, when you get into a room and either you're doing mantras or you're just simply meditating in silence, the consciousness of the group raises the consciousness of the individual. And I don't know, anybody who's ever done it walks away and you can feel it. I mean, you can feel this energy, this heightened energy from group consciousness. And it's basically, and I don't keep being bashing on the Christian church, but it's what I know because it's what I'm raised around. But you go into a Christian church, and Christians will talk about, the Christian eye. People are looking at the way that you're dressed, the way that you speak. They're constantly judging. They're constantly nitpicking and looking for negative things. But spiritually minded people, when they come into a group, doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if you're white, doesn't matter if you're wearing an ankh, doesn't matter if you're wearing a cross, a Star of David. Spiritually minded people just embrace each other in love and non-judgment, And it's that non-judgment, that love, that allows you to heighten your awareness and heighten your own spirituality. Too many people who are religiously minded, they're so dogmatic, they go out to crush and condemn and not uplift another person. So with spiritually minded people, when they get together, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not crazy, and I'm not alone, and you feel empowered. You feel so empowered. But as far as like group rites of passage, I think that it's all symbolism. The Buddhists have there's a really, really good short book called Simple Zen. And it talks about Zen meditation and how it came about and Buddhist teaching. But it talks about koans, and it's Koan. And essentially what a koan is like a riddle, where it was a method of a master or an enlightened person bringing an adept or a student or a pupil to enlightenment. It's just one method of many. But I particularly like the method. But it's you present your student with a riddle. For example, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Or can you think of nothing and think nothing of it at all? And it's supposed to allow the student to roll it over in their own head, and essentially it's the master trying to replicate the frame of mind in the student that he had when he became enlightened. Right? So I believe that rites of passage are that. It's, Freemasons have rites of passage, the initiation of the pyramid. Mormons do the temple ceremonies. Christians do baptisms. But it's not so much that the ritual does anything at all. It's that you're trying to get the student or the person who's on the path of spirituality to see what the ritual means to them personally. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Yes, it's, but you have a community that witness your transformation, and there's something in that as well that I think is important for people. I was raised Quaker, but that was my mother converted when I was maybe 13. And Quakers, they're Christocentric, I guess you could say. And they sit around and facing pews, and it's basically a group meditation until someone is moved by the Spirit to speak, and then they get up and speak, and then they sit down, and everybody witnesses what they have to say. They sit down, and then eventually somebody gets up and says something else, and it's kind of interesting because frequently you're sort of thinking along the same lines as that next person that gets up and says something. And I kind of miss that, but for me, the Quakers were not celebratory enough, and I think that we really are missing out on like the ecstatic part of worship, especially people who are influenced by or raised Christian. I think the ecstatic part, the joy that has no opposite, as J.J. Gray calls it, or as the mystics call it. Access to that, I think we really, really need that back. So
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. And it's because, and this is just me, what my research has taken me to. I do believe in evil. I do believe in malevolent entities and forces that feed off of us. You can call them psychic vampires.
Absolutely.
You can call them archons. You can call them demons. Whatever you want to call them, jinn. But they're parasites, and they feed off of our negative energy. We're like batteries to them. And
can I say something here? They feed off.
Go ahead.
They not only feed off our negative energy, they feed off anything that we're willing to give them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but negativity, like fear and worry and stuff like that's like that's their main course. They love it.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
But one of the things that they've established is organized religion, and for the past 2,000 years, it's been through the quote unquote Christian church. And I'm sorry, but anybody who's a Protestant or anything, look. You got to stop for a second. Now, you go into a Baptist church and you talk about the Catholic Church as the Antichrist and everything. Let's go back to the Reformation. You mean to tell me that for centuries the Catholic Church had the Spanish Inquisition? They were, throwing people on the rack, throwing people to the fires, and then you're going to let Martin Luther walk up all of a sudden to the doors of the cathedral and nail a thesis, and then you have a Reformation. You don't think the Catholic Church was going to do something about that? You're out of your mind. It's called controlled opposition. What was going on at the time was you had church and state, the monarchy and the Pope, the papacy. And there was starting to be, a power struggle. So the Pope realized that they had to create controlled opposition. Let's give them the illusion of choice from the Catholic Church. Let's give them Protestantism. So today, if you fast forward it, I don't care if you're a Methodist, a Lutheran, a Baptist, I don't care. You are getting your dogma and your doctrine from the Catholic Church. That is exactly what you're getting it from. And you can sit there and fight against the Pope and say all kinds of horrible things, but at the end of the day, that's where it comes from. It was controlled opposition. And that's all it is. But so this organized religion kind of indoctrinate. I'll tell you a personal experience just to give you an idea, if that's okay.
Sure.
When I was 14 or 15, my parents were always and I love my parents, but they were never religious. They had their own thing, and they never tried to push anything on me. They were, he's a smart kid. He could figure it out on his own. But when I was 14 or 15, I had an incident where, some born-again Christians wanted me to come to church, and everybody's experienced that, You need to be saved, brother. You're going to go to hell, that's a totally different topic, but, George Carlin talks about that and all loving God, but he's going to send you to hell forever, But, so I had some born-again Christians come around me, and they were badgering me to go to church, and I'm like, no, I'm good. Me and God got our own thing, and, I believe that there's a spirit and all this. Yeah, but that wasn't good enough for him, because I had to say certain words and I had to believe a certain way, for them to be satisfied that my soul was safe, So I think I'd made a bet with one of them, and I lost it. So the conditions of the bet was that I would go to this, it was the town next over, so I had to spend the night on a Saturday and go to church in the morning. So I was like, okay, whatever, fine, I'll do it. I'm 14 years old. So I go, and I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. Love music. When you want to talk about spirituality and being one with God, get you some good music, man, and listen to, feel the music. Even in Genesis, it talks about God speaking everything into existence through vibration. Music is wonderful. And so, Led Zeppelin is one of the bands, and thank God, by the way, anybody who's a Led Zeppelin fan, they just announced a new studio album, so Jesus does love me. But I was a huge Led Zeppelin fan and loved their lyrics. I had Stairway to Heaven in a frame on my wall, because I find that the lyrics to Led Zeppelin songs, so spiritual. there's so many deep things. I'm a traveler of both time and space to seeing where, to be where I have been and things like that. There's a lot of spirituality in Led Zeppelin's lyrics. So here I am. I'm in this town, spending the night, and they knew that I was a huge music fan, and so they pulled this old VHS tape out. And anybody who's been around Christian circles has probably come across this videotape, but They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll. Have you ever seen this?
Yes. It's like Reefer Madness, but yeah.
So they put this thing on, and I'm 14, and this guy proceeds to go through all of my favorite bands and favorite artists, play lyrics backwards, show you symbols that mean the devil, and the devil's going to bring you to hell, and all these people are talking about demons giving them the lyrics, and by the end of the 2 hours, you're shaking like a leaf. Okay? You're scared. You've been inundated for 2 hours with fear-based trauma. You've been traumatized. Because now you're facing eternal hell because you happen to like cashmere, or because your hair is long, or whatever. So I had to mull this over all night long. I'm sitting there going, oh my God, God's going to send me to hell. God's going to send me to hell. God's going to send me to hell. Fear, fear, fear. So then we get to church the next day, and it's a Southern Baptist fire and brimstone preacher. And, you know how Christian circles work. They always call the preacher up the night before, behind your back and say, hey, Pastor so-and-so, I'm bringing, my brother or my cousin or whoever in church tomorrow, and he really needs to get saved. So you think you can hit on this, this, and this? And, of course, the preacher does, right? You walk into the church the next morning, and all these Christians are clapping and giving you the Christian aisle. Oh, brother, he's going to get saved. Oh, yeah, and all this. So this was the situation I was in. So the preacher starts talking or preaching or whatever, and he keeps preaching about, many will say on that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied and, healed and cast out demons in your name? And I will look at them and say, depart from me, ye workers of iniquity, I never knew you, right? So I'm going, oh, Lord, I'm going to hell and Led Zeppelin and all this stuff. And finally they give the altar call. Anybody who needs to come and get saved and turn their heart to Jesus, come on down. Which, why would you have to do that? Why would you have to make a public display? Why can't you just do it where you're standing?
Right.
But they want to see it. They want to see you submit. They want to see you bow down. That's what it is. But so they start singing, this is my Father's world, or Saved by the Blood, or some old Christian hymn, and you haven't gone down to the front yet, So they said, well, we're going to sing one more line, and anybody who wants to get saved, come on down. So after they sang the next, verse, I was like, okay, everybody's looking at me in the church. I do feel convicted. I am afraid. I don't want to go to hell. If that's what they say, I'm 14. They probably know better than me. Okay. So I get up and I walk down the aisle and I, do what they tell me to do and bow down, and some dude prays with me and, and ask for forgiveness. And, at 14, I've done some horrible things. It's quote unquote sinned, So I was like, trying to roll this over in my head. Okay, I've done horrible things. Because I've done horrible things, I'm going to go to hell. But, if I believe this, then I'm forgiven for everything, and I get to go to heaven. So I genuinely had a spiritual experience where I felt relieved. I felt like all of these horrible things that I'd done were lifted off of me. And I had a spiritual experience. Now, was it because I did what they told me to do? Not really. It's because in my own internal psychology, I had let it go, right?
Right.
Or as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, let go and let God. But it wasn't because I did their ritual. It was because I had made an internal revelation that I was forgiven. Who really forgave me? Myself. It was really me that forgave myself, because it was me that was holding on to that stuff, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So it was me. It wasn't their ritual. It was me that forgave myself. Well, at 14, I didn't understand this, so I stood up and I praise the Lord. I'm saved. Hoo-hoo. So at the time, I had hair down, past my shoulders. I was kind of a hippie-looking guy, and I get in the car with the guys who brought me to church, and they're all, happy because I just became a born-again Christian, and all this stuff. And I'm smiling because I just had this genuine spiritual experience. And then on the way back, it was 5 minutes away from the church. The person who took me looked over at me, and they said, so when are you going to cut your hair? Right? And I
Yeah,
stopped.
when are you going to remove your power, right?
Yep. When are you going to conform? When are you going to conform to our preconception of what somebody spiritually minded needs to look like? So I looked at the person and I said, what do you mean? Come on, man. You know why you got long hair. You're just being rebellious. You're not being obedient to the will of God. And at that point, I realized, maybe not on a huge level, but it was there, that organized religion is about submission. And it's about fear. It's about trauma. It's about keeping you in fear of God. And these archons or these negative entities or demons or whatever, that is what they feed off of. So, if organized religion is based off of fear-based mind control, which it is, who's really running the show behind these churches? Is it God? Can't be. Because if you go into a church where they make you feel bad about everything you did that week, or everything you think, all these, carnal, you saw a pretty woman, or whatever, you're a sinner. A beautiful woman happened to pass, your eyesight, you sinner. And you're constantly bombarded. You're constantly having to, is this a sin? Is this a sin? Is this a sin? That's keeping you in negativity, man. You're feeding. You're being fed upon. And so that was my personal experience, with coming to understand what's really behind organized religion.
Yeah, and you made some good points there about power, I think, and its connection with spirituality, and your own internal revelation was the key to your own well-being and happiness. But I think that the structure of the church and I call them the psychopaths in charge. They're in charge of the church, they're in charge of government, they're in charge of everything. Pathological, parasitic, consciousness parasites, basically. Is and there's various words or metaphors you can use, but you're prevented from having further revelations through this trauma, which divorces you from your own spirituality, unless you rebel or unless you don't conform. Then you being a nonconformist is about staying connected to your own source, to your own form of spirituality, and organized religion takes that away from you. But what I really want to ask you right now is about that continued revelation, which is available to us all at any time. Do you think that religion and spirituality were ever one, or do you think that they were divorced from the beginning?
From the beginning. Yeah, it was divorced from the beginning. Religion is the antithesis of spirituality. It is. The two are diametrically opposed. Religion and spirituality are diametrically opposed. Now, don't get me wrong. David Wilcock talks about this. All religions have the truth, okay, but they also are deceitful. All religions are the path, to enlightenment, but they're also the prison. And anybody who studies black magic or the occult, and the occult doesn't mean anything negative. It just means that which is hidden. But within black magic, black magicians, before they do a curse or a spell, they have to give you a warning. So they have to, based off of the law of magic, they have to give you an out. They have to give you a kernel of truth, or their black magic doesn't work. Okay? Like the Roman maxim, let he who will be deceived be deceived. They get, their magic is imbued with power because they say that the best place to hide a lie is out in the open. Right. Black magic works best if they show you the truth mixed with a lie, and because you were so ignorant, that gives them more power. So, and it also
it's like you have to invite the devil in, right? The devil has to be invited in. There's that metaphor too that's used in Christianity, but what they're telling you is how the psychopaths in charge hook you. They hook you with the truth, and then once they get you in, you've already invited them to to feed off you, basically.
Yep, rat poison is 99% good food. You look on the side, that's what it says. It's 99% good food. But so a person can. Are you familiar with the story of the maze of the Minotaur?
Why don't you refresh my memory?
You go back to Greek mythology, Roman and Greek mythology. There's the maze of the Minotaur, and I don't want to get into the whole background story, but essentially the byproduct of a god and a goddess was the Minotaur, and it was this horrible beast, and in order to kind of keep its ravaging rage contained, they built this labyrinth, and it would run around the labyrinth. And I think it was either Hercules. I'm pretty sure it was Hercules. Hercules and his 7 good deeds or whatever had to go into the Minotaur, to the maze of the Minotaur, and slay it. Right? Well, it's a great story, but it's also an allegory of organized religion. Okay, and for a perfect example of this, and people are going to find this very, very strange, but look up on YouTube Katy Perry's music video, I'm Wide Awake or Wide Awake. There's so much symbolism in that one video. And you don't have to be a Katy Perry fan, to get the symbolism. But she's, talking about the Illuminati and symbolism, that video is very much illuminated. But what the ancients were trying to tell us was that the maze or the labyrinth is the world systems of organized religion that we run around. And whenever we come face to face with the Minotaur, most people out of fear run from it. But the true hero faces the Minotaur and slays it, and then the labyrinth comes crashing down. Now, what does this mean? How are we supposed to look at ourselves in this allegory? Well, Satan or the devil. Christians really get upset when you say that, the devil, Lucifer, Satan, and the Antichrist are actually 4 distinct entities, right? Which are allegories of us. Well, if you go to the New Testament, Jesus or Yeshua is out in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and all of a sudden, right before he reaches spiritual enlightenment, here comes the devil. Poop! Out of nowhere, here's the devil, and he tempts him. It says, we have a record of three temptations, but it was probably more, but we have a record of 3 temptations, where Yeshua has to face these temptations, and then the devil flees from him. Well, anybody who does any kind of research or asks the logical question of where was Jesus or Yeshua from 12 to 30. Well, if we start looking at things like the Library of Kashmir, we find out that there was a guy running around during that period named Issa. He went by Issa. He went by Yeshua. He had several different names, and there's a reason for that too. The Kabbalah says if you change your name, you change your fate. Most spiritual teachings, you have a different name. Most people who convert to Islam, they change their name. Wiccans have a secret name. The Bible talks about, I'll give you a new name. The Kabbalah says change your name. You create your own identity, but that's another issue. But if you look at texts from around that time, there was a guy that was popping up that fit the description of Yeshua or Jesus. He went to Ireland. He went to Scotland. He studied with the Druids. He studied with the Celts. He studied with the Buddhists. He studied with the Hindus. He was essentially learning the world's religions. Okay, he studied tantric breathing, yoga. You could compare some quotes from the Buddha to Yeshua, and they're almost identical, if not identical. But what Yeshua was doing was he was learning the world's religions, as many as he could, in the area that he lived, and then going, okay, well, they're all saying the same thing. Now I got to go back to my people, the Hebrews, and try to relate this information to them in a language they can understand. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, and if you ask a Hindu if they believe that Yeshua was who he says he was, they'll say yes. If you ask a Buddhist if Yeshua was who he says he was, the Son of the living God, they'll say yes. Buddhists and Hindus already practice Christianity because their belief system mandates that the Bible is true, that he's an avatar of Brahma, the All, the one God. The Christians don't want to see that. Now, Kira, you're going to have to, and I apologize, whenever I tell stories or give answers, I kind of tend to go all the way around the lake and bring it back around, if you haven't picked that up already.
That's good.
But we're talking about the labyrinth, that's right. So, okay, so if this is true, if Yeshua had learned his particular teachings from all the world's religions, and now we find him 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, and then Satan pops up, and he's tempted. Where did that come from? Well, go back about 500 years, and you come to the Buddha. You know, and anybody who knows the story of the Buddha, he was, you know, a young prince, spiritually minded, went out on a quest. He studied Hinduism, Brahmanism, all these different religions. He found good stuff in all of it, but he still didn't have the solution to the problem of why is there suffering in the world. And he was afraid that if he died, he'd never get the answer. So finally he sits under the Bodhi tree and says, I'm either going to sit here and die, or enlightenment is going to come to me, and I'm going to get the answer. So he sat there. Some say it was a night. I don't really personally believe it, and I really don't think it matters, but most Buddhists will tell you it was 40 days and 40 nights. Uh-oh, sound familiar? 40 days and 40 nights of fasting alone. And at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, or however long you want to interpret his time of enlightenment, I believe it was 40 days and 40 nights, but that's me, it says the Hasatan, or the Satan, appears to him to try to scare him away from enlightenment. And at first the Hasatan throws fiery darts at him to scare him away through physical pain. But the Buddha remains, and all the fiery darts turn into lotus flowers, and they fall at his feet. And so then the three beautiful daughters of the Hasatan appear to tempt him through, carnality, away from enlightenment, and he refuses. And then they turn into these hideous hags, and they start ripping each other apart to humiliate him, and all these things to shame him away from enlightenment. And it was after his 3 temptations where the Buddha realized that the only power that the Hasatan had over him was his own temptations. And then he realized that the Hasatan in fact was himself. That the devil was not this outside entity, it was his own ego. It was his personal Satan. It was his ego, his little self. And so then you have the teachings of Buddhism, which is, the fourfold, the Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desire. Desire is caused by the self, or the ego. And then the fourth noble truth, which leads into the Eightfold Path, is there is no self, or there is no ego. There is no Satan. There's no all great powerful Satan. It's your own dark half that you have to face. And so the Greeks knew about this with the maze of the Minotaur. The Minotaur is exactly that. It's your ego. The devil is your own ego. It's yourself. It's the identity that was given to you, your lesser self. If you want to bring it to more modern terms, which I love to do, Yeshua, all great teachers teach in parables. Because after all, God or Spirit is ineffable. You really can't put it into words. You can only try to compare it to something that people know. That's why Yeshua always said that, the kingdom of heaven is like this or like that. And then he would tell a story. But in modern day, I would say that this whole ego, higher self, God and devil thing can best be related. Pop in the Matrix movies. Pop in the Matrix trilogy. Right? You have Thomas Anderson, his lower self, this identity or this ego that's born into a system that is a prison. It's a prison for your mind, so these other entities can feed off of your energy. And then when he breaks free or he touches his higher self, he becomes Neo, the one who is connected to the source. And at this point, he can interact with both worlds. The world he was born into and the world where he's really from, his higher self. And once he touches that higher self, he can do some phenomenal things inside the illusory world. Does that make sense, Kira?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely.
And those movies are, hopefully nobody will form it into a religion, but those movies are deeply insightful with spirituality. And I think that's why a lot of people got the first one, and they love the first movie, because everybody is born with this sense of something's not right in the world. But when it gets to the second and the third movie, most people said they were horrible. And it's because, well, most people don't pursue the path of spirituality enough to really get what those movies were talking about, to get the deeper things. And, that's okay. But the Wachowski brothers probably knew that when they made the movies anyway,
Well, maybe also there's some other agendas, at work, because after all, they're always giving you a piece of the truth, right? Or even innocently the piece that they know of the truth. And there could be other agendas in there too. So I think it's healthy to look at that as well as, just like you would anything else. But yeah, they definitely knew archetypes, they knew mythology, and they put it all in there, and they created it basically like a new myth, which is what every religion really is sort of a new myth or a new way of explaining what we've been trying to explain forever.
Joseph most of your story, well, all of your stories are written based off of Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. Every world religion, the main character is an allegory of you. Yeshua, you're supposed to, Christians say today, what would Jesus do? It's an allegory. Even in the New Testament, Jesus says that the Old Testament was written as an allegory. And Christians, whenever I show them that, they do not like that. I say, look, he said that the Old Testament is an allegory. It is not literally history. Okay, it may be inspired by history, but it was intended to be an allegory of us. What you're supposed to do is look in these myths and look in these religious texts, and you're supposed to, like if you're reading the New Testament, for example, say, okay, if the character of Jesus or Yeshua is the hero of the story, and this is an allegory or a mirror of me, where am I at in the story? Whenever I first, because I have spiritual guides who are, I don't believe they're from this plane for sure, though they may manifest themselves that way. One of my spiritual guides sat me down one day when I had first opened up my third eye. You know what the Kundalini is?
I sure do.
Okay. Whenever I'd gone through the Kundalini and I'd opened up my third eye, my crown chakra, and I needed help, because anybody who's been through the Kundalini knows it is the most intense experience you will ever go through. People around you will think you're going insane, because you have access to knowledge, and you can, this is when we get into some metaphysical stuff, but it's very overwhelming. It changes your whole perspective on everything. So I needed help, and one of my spiritual guides, he said, he sat me down with a copy of the Bible, because that's the school of thought that I've been raised in. And he said, do you know how Jesus could tell the future? And I said, how? He said he read the book of Daniel, and he played it out as a script. That's how he could tell the future. Okay? Because there's nothing new under the sun. And everything is a cycle. As above, so below. As within, so without. It's all a cycle. The hero's journey. So, what these allegories and these myths are intended to do is to get us to look for ourselves in the story. And ask yourself where you are in the story. So if you're Jesus, where are you at in your own personal spiritual journey? Are you at the birth, the miraculous birth? Are you during the period of learning? Are you during the period of wandering in the wilderness? Are you during the period of teaching? Are you during the period of betrayal and crucifixion and isolation and loneliness? Are you living out the spiritual experience of resurrection? Reigning? Where are you at in the story? Once you can pinpoint where you're at in the story, you have clairvoyance as to where the story is going to go. Which gives you a oneness. That's what these allegories and these myths are for. And I'll take it. Christians don't like to do this, but I do. the Bible says all Scripture is inspired by God. But then they limit Scripture to the 66 books of the canon. Well, I personally don't believe that. As a writer, I know what the word Scripture means. Anything written, scribbled, script, right? It's a script. And when I know that when I sit down to write, it's not so much me that's writing it, though it's being channeled through me, so to speak. It's coming through me, and my personal experiences on this planet kind of mold it a little bit. But it's coming from somewhere else. It's coming from a higher consciousness, right? So I personally believe, just like the Bible says, that all Scripture is inspired by God. Anything written. So I believe personally, I know people who have become spiritually enlightened by watching a movie, and it finally clicks, Oh my God, people who are really into comic books and superheroes, and they have an affinity, I'm so glad all these Marvel movies are coming out, and people are loving it, and it's because underneath, their conscious mind, they are identifying with the heroes of the story. Typically, people who were born to humble beginnings inherit great power, and have to go through this unimaginable struggle. But at the end, the good guy or the hero always comes out on top. And people are flocking to the movie theaters, and they're making these movies huge, and they think it's just entertainment, but it's really because they're seeking themselves. They're seeking, maybe somebody's struggling with whatever everybody's struggling, that I know of. You talk about people in the liberty or spiritual movement. They've been going through so much, financially, with relationships, emotionally. They're going through that part of the movie or that part of the book or that part of the myth where they're really fighting the last fight, and they just have to hang on, but that's why we're so drawn to these myths and these stories of heroes, because we're looking for ourselves. We're looking for that inner part of us, that spirit within that can make us rise like a phoenix no matter what circumstances we came from. A lot of people look at Hollywood and people who, and I understand there are people who are on different levels in the movement and all that, but you go down to like the Alex Jones people, and I'm not bashing them. They're on the path. But they look at these symbols and stuff in Hollywood movies or music videos, and they freak out. And it's the Illuminati. It's the One World Order. They're trying to brainwash us. But when you get on higher and you understand what these symbols and these emblems and all this stuff mean, it's all you, But
right.
So.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like for you, where you're at is in your own personal journey, and is that your spirituality informs you in such a way that motivates or moves you to be involved in the political process, no matter its flaws. That it's part of your sort of hero's journey is this involvement, and that it's part of your orientation that it's important to show up and to participate in the political process. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because that's where we started, and I want to see where you're coming from a little bit more with that.
Well, hang on just a second. The same spiritual guide who told me about how to kind of see the footsteps of the future by reading, these scriptures and things like that. He knew that I was a political activist. I was very heavily involved, and I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I just, but these are tools that you work within. But he asked me, because at the end of the day, if we really start to look at this agenda that's going on, everybody, especially in politics, has their church, so to speak. Some people are against the military-industrial complex. Some people are against GMO foods. Some people are against the fiat currency, the Federal Reserve. Some people are against the police state. But what a lot of them aren't doing is making the connections between those issues. Like you'll go into certain political groups and they'll say, the key to winning this is to get rid of the military-industrial complex. And then others will say, no, that's not the key. The key is to end the Fed, okay? And then other people will say, no, that's not the key. It's to get fluoride out of the water, right? But the key is to connect why the control system is doing all of those things simultaneously, because it's multifaceted. So when we really start to look at it, what is going on here? Well, for one thing, and of course organized religion is also a part of the political control system. For example, most of our foreign policy is based off of Israel. Where does that come from? It comes from this Orthodox Christian view of an end times prophecy where Israel plays a key role. Therefore, you have this war that's been going on for more than 20 plus years in the Middle East. Okay, where does that stem from? Spirituality. Okay, GMO foods, genetically modified organisms. What's it doing? Well, it's depleting our bodies from the vitamins and the nutrients that it needs. We're literally starving to death. Okay, so we're weak as far as minerals and vitamins go. Fluoride and chemicals in the water, pharmaceutical drugs, what are they doing? They're attacking the pineal gland or the pineal gland or your third eye, which connects you to spirit. Okay, so what they're actually doing, is one, they've got to hit your third eye because they want to disconnect you from that divine providence that the founding fathers talked about, right? And let me illustrate this with a parable. One of the other contributors to ZenTheCard.com, he's a really good friend of mine, Jason Patrick. He was best known for his work at the Bundy Ranch. He was out in Oregon with the BLM standoff there. He's a really good friend of mine. He's a passionate patriot. But we were having a discussion one night, and he was a prepper. He's like, well, what are you going to do when it all hits the fan, man? How much ammo do you have stored up? I said, none. How much food do you got stored? I said, none. Well, do you got a bug out plan? I said, no. What do you mean? You're in the political system. You know all this stuff, but you don't have a backup plan. I said, Patrick, look, it's about to be fall. You see all these birds out in my backyard? There's not one bird that stands up and says, all right, guys, we got to fly south. No, all of them collectively hear this whisper from the spirit, and they just go. They just go. They follow the spirit, and they go, and they get to where they're supposed to get to. Without a compass, without a map, without Google, they just follow the spirit. I said, so if it all hits the fan, that's what I'm going to do. So the reason that you have the attack on the pineal gland is because that is the antenna that is connecting us to the same spirit that these birds listen to. And the control system wants to disconnect us from that spirit. So that's where you get your big pharma. Okay, the big pharma aspect is to break away from divinity. When you get into hand gestures, you see people holding up the devil horns or anything like that. That gets into ancient sacred geometry and everything. Is telling you to break away from divinity. Well, so when you start to connect all these things politically and spiritually, I realized, okay, well, you're going to have to be able to inject yourself into the system. And when I was sitting down with my spiritual guide, who's a homeopath, and he knows a lot of this stuff, and he knew that I was very active in the political movement. I was an activist. I give speeches at different rallies. He said, son, do you know how the only way that you can change a government? And I said, how? And he said, just like you change a tire that can't be, that's been ruptured, you have to change it from the inside out. You have to inject yourself, your beliefs, your ideology, your spirituality inside of the machine and let it infect, kind of like a reverse cancer cell. So, the reason that I remain politically active, and I'm not so active in the Republican Party because it's fallen apart, but I am an activist, is because the only way that on a global level we're going to shift the consciousness is if we spiritually minded people, okay, great, you're going to sit in a cave and see your visions, you're going to meditate, you're going to, be one with God on the mountaintop and in the wilderness. That's great for you. How are you going to uplift the consciousness of humanity as a whole so that this entire planet can heal, And this entire planet can become what it used to be, which is a golden era, a golden age. People in the political movement, they get weirded out because they look on the back of the dollar and they think that it says, behold the coming of the new world order. That is not what it says. It says, behold the coming of the new order of the ages. The founding fathers were Gnostics. They knew about the ages of the zodiac. So, many people who I meet in the political movement, they're on the spiritual path. Why? Because they realize there's something wrong with the world as a whole, and they feel compelled to do something about it. It's just within them. So, as a fisherman or a fisher of men, I go to where the fish are biting, right? I don't want, I want to have children. I don't want to leave a world to the next generation that's based off of fiat currency, and there's poison in the water and poison in the food, and we're fighting proxy wars for different interpretations of how you're supposed to say the name God. I don't want the next generation to do that. The reason that we had to grow up in this world is because the generations before us let it slide, and they were apathetic. So it's my personal belief that we can stop it in a generation. All we have to do is, all of us spiritually minded people have to inject ourselves in the political system, which has been taboo in this country for a long time. So the two, spirituality and politics, are intertwined. They're intertwined, and those who are in the political school have been isolated from spirituality, and vice versa. And because we're in the new age, it's an exciting time to be here, especially if you're spiritually minded. We are the generation that's building the foundation for a new age, a new era. It's not some new world, one world order type, Orwellian thing. It's this new age of enlightenment. So how are you going to do that? Well, great. The purpose of you doing your prayer and your meditation is to be infused with the power of Source or God. For what? To effect change around you. To wake up people around you. So that's why I stay in activism. I try to make these connections where other people won't make the connections on their own between spirituality and politics.
Okay. I'm trying to think of how I want to ask you these next questions. Who are your people?
What do you mean?
Genetically, who are your people?
Who are my people?
Yeah.
Everyone I meet. Everyone I meet. I mean, we're all... I don't see distinctions. I see...
What people do you come from?
You mean ethnically?
Yes.
This particular vessel. Mostly Irish. I come from mostly Irish stock. Got a little Native American from my mother's side, but anybody who sees me or knows me, they know I'm a Mick.
A redneck, did you say, or a hick?
A Mick.
Oh, a Mick, okay. Okay. So, as a person of Irish descent, primarily, do you know what your native tribe is? Who your native tribe is?
No, I don't.
Okay. So, as a person of primarily Irish descent, do you feel that Irish teachings, Irish spirituality, indigenous Irish life ways and teachings should be primary in informing your spirituality, or do you think it doesn't really matter?
Doesn't matter. I have an affinity for Irish culture. I have an affinity for Irish, anybody who's ever heard of Michael Sarian, he talks about the civilization, being based off the Irish are the only culture in the old world that migrated from west to east. But if you look at the map, there's nothing west of Ireland except for the ocean. And the ancient Druids will tell you they were the direct descendants from Atlantis. And so we they're teaching. I mean, for example, when the Druids would get together, they would use the wood of a holly tree to perform magic, which is where you get holly wood or movie magic. And so then you get down to St. Patrick. Well, the Catholic Church wanted to, any empire, whenever you're trying to consolidate power into the few, to an oligarchy, what you do is you go into a land that you're trying to conquer that's enlightened, and you obtain all the knowledge and all the information, like the Library of Alexandria. You hoard the information, and then you burn it. So when the Catholic Church came along, what do? They took all these scrolls and all these scriptures, and they're at the bottom of the Vatican, and only a few people can read it or even look at them. And so then they delete and edit information, and then they change it to Latin and make it illegal to read. And then they chain the Bible to the pulpit in case you can read. Why? Because, like in this country, whenever slavery was around, it was illegal for, you to teach black people how to read. Because knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge is power, but getting the knowledge is dangerous for them, for the control. You want people in ignorance if you want to control them. So St. Patrick was sent in to run out the serpents or the snakes, the serpent people of the Kundalini, and then convert them. So, but if you get back to, Michael Sarian does great work on that. I'm going to that's his field, so I'm not going to really, but okay. He talks about
let's stop
Irish.
Here. Let's stop here for a minute, okay? So, the first thing done to a people to conquer them is to take away their indigenous knowledge, their spiritual knowledge, their traditions. So wouldn't that then be important to know what was taken from you in your own spiritual journey, to reclaim that as part of your personal monomyth? Okay. Yes,
but like, for example, I wouldn't sit here like if I know several Native Americans. That's how they connect to spirit and to source. So it's important for them to know it. However, it's when I say it doesn't matter, what I mean is, as an Irish person, I can still come to the understanding of spirituality through Native American understanding.
Yes, but you're Native too.
Yeah, right. But you understand what I'm saying? Or as a Hindu, I can still, even without the information of knowing my roots, my Irish roots, I can still come to spirit or source through Hindu teaching. So, yeah, I believe it's important, but I don't believe that it matters in that it's essential to know your particular ethnic teachings. Because at the end of the day, this vessel or this body comes from Irish descent, but that which was within, the spirit that's within me, I'm riding in an Irish body, okay, but I could still learn the truth of spirituality from any culture or any tradition.
Sure, but you may be more informed by Hinduism because of some ancient connection between the Irish people and the people of India, whereas you may be less informed or more imprisoned by Christianity because it was the Romans that took over England and then Ireland, because that's the conquering religion rather than, you know what I mean? So this is where I'm going with this, is that this idea of, yes, ultimately you can come to spiritual understanding and knowledge, no matter, wherever you are on your journey is where you are, and that's where you are, that's to be celebrated and understood. But that to take your understanding to the next level, those things that are occulted for you as an Irish person about your own indigenous lifeways or spirituality or stories, I think they are important to take you to the next level, for you to find out what that connection is with Hinduism, for instance. You have a deep connection there, and for you to find that out, I think would be a good thing for you, would be something that would be the next level of revelation for you. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, and you just kind of brought it to my mind. When you want to talk about reincarnation and memory of past lives, what we're really talking about is genetic memory.
Yeah.
For example, with genetic memory, and again, Michael Sarian talked about this a lot. He's really, really good at it. You know, you have certain birds when they migrate, they'll get out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and they'll start to circle this one area where there's nothing but water. But a few thousand years ago, there was an island there, you know, and it's written in their DNA, their genetic memory, that, you know, at one point in history, their breed or their stock would kind of rest there. And it's still there. For example, my father was an electrician by trade, but my uncle was a painter, and his father was a painter by trade. And earlier in my spiritual journey, you know, I never really studied, you know, electrical work or anything like that, or painting. But, you know, I was married at the time, and we were going to paint, you know, some rooms in the house, and I found that it became second nature to me, painting. It was like almost like I knew how to do it. And it was, you know, when I started to study reincarnation and science at the same time, it slowly dawned on me, especially through, you know, and connecting it to, there's a video game series called Assassin's Creed that does a really good job with explaining this, and people don't realize it, but is accessing genetic memory. Like, for example, in your DNA is the stored memory of all of your ancestors. It's in there. It's just locked away, but you can access it. And a lot of times when people have these experiences where they're remembering past lives, what they're actually doing is accessing memories of their ancestors. You know, there's a line in Steven Spielberg has a movie called Amistad, where John Adams is talking to one of the slaves that's on trial for murder, and he's praying. And John Adams asks him, you know, who are you praying to? And he says, I'm praying to my ancestors, because at this moment in time, the entire reason that any of them ever existed was for me, was for this moment. And it's a profound statement. So, because inside of you is genetic memory of all of your ancestors, you know, it's there, it's stored. We know so little about DNA. You know, they call the rest, what they don't understand, they call it junk DNA. Give me a break. No, these are, you know...
There's no accidents there. Yeah. There's no junk DNA.
Your latent gifts, your latent abilities, your talents, it's all the abilities and the talents of your ancestors. And it's locked within you if you can figure out how to unlock it. So, yeah, I agree with you.
The other piece of genetic memory is the genetic memory of trauma as well, as you know, the key to uncovering who you really are. So yes. I sit around and I think about how you know, trauma and genetic memory also plays into the trauma control of religion, and you know, and how this we're constantly forced to keep looking at the Middle East as the center of creation. We've been conquered and turned into Christians. So even when we reject that, because of the trauma that it causes in our lives to be Christian, I think that we still have to deal with that genetic memory of trauma, of having been converted in the first place. And so even when we come out of this life's, you know, we're this life's trauma and control, we're still dealing with that of our ancestors as well. Even when we're thinking or imagining our way out of this prison, we still have to deal with the prisons of our ancestors too, so that we don't just build a new prison.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And people bash Scientology. You know, but Scientology has a concept of this. They call it the engrams. You know, it's trauma that not only goes back to, it's not only trauma from your particular birth in this body that you're in, but it goes back to the beginning. And, you know, yeah, I'm not advocating Scientology. I'm just saying, like I've been saying, you know, this whole interview, is that there's truth in everything. But you're absolutely correct. Trauma, the Bible talks about the sins of the father passing from one generation to the next, and you know, clearing those family curses. which that's a long discussion, and I could really get into some stuff on that. But it would take people who aren't on the level that clearly you and I are at. It would take them to suspend a lot of what they believe they know.
Well, why don't you come back and we'll have that discussion next?
Sure, that sounds like a plan, because it goes into some crazy play. I'll go ahead and ask you this: have you ever had visions or dreams, or what's your experience with the metaphysical in that way?
I have sort of told this story. Well, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because it's the context of my own experience. When I was 8 years old, I was sexually assaulted by my mother's boyfriend, and I didn't remember it until I was 25. Mm-hmm. But there was a piece of me that was missing from that. There was a piece of me let loose, and I finally understood what that was when I remembered it, and when I learned about the Lakota teaching of the four souls. So this particular piece is called the Naya. It's basically what leaves when you're sleeping and you go traveling, or when you astrally project, or it's this piece that can sort of leave you, but you can still be alive. It's not like your whole soul. So
yeah, in astral projection it's called the Watcher, but I understand what you're saying. Go ahead. Okay.
So in Lakota tradition, it's called the Naya. Okay. So that piece was gone from the time I was 8 until the time I was 25, and I remembered. And that piece coming back to me is what gave me that memory back.
Right.
And the other three aspects of the soul are the piece of God, the little Nagila, or the piece of divinity that we all carry with us, the life force energy, or the chi, which is also called the Sekun, and it's medicine people are really adept at being able to share that, to be able to heal people. They can manipulate this life force energy, and it's also what we gather when our Naya is out traveling. We gather that, and we gather spiritual knowledge. And then there's also that sort of ghostly aspect, or that piece of us that remembers what our ancestors remember, that piece of us that's lived before. And all of these things together make us a unique human being. We're never all four of these aspects the same. It's only pieces of our soul that have lived before, or that we carry with us. So the vision that I wanted to share is this vision of myself and what had happened to me. I don't want to go too much into detail, but I went both backwards and forward in the memory. So I went backward into my body and then saw the demon face that was sexually assaulting me, and then I saw myself leave, that piece of myself leave my body, and then I was floating in the corner of the room, and there was this winged being that was protecting that piece of me, literally like under its wings. So yeah, I've had visions and things before.
Yeah, I just made a Facebook post about it, about the interview that we're doing, that this would have us committed in certain circles, because whenever you start to talk about the metaphysical, oh my goodness, certain people are just not ready for it. But are you familiar with most people who are into Santeria or voodoo, things of that nature? They call them walk-ins, which typically happens when you're adolescents, where you see silhouette or shadowy figures at key moments in your growth and development. Yes. Are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Okay. I would suggest to people who have had that experience to go rent Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey to try to get a better understanding of exactly what walk-ins are. Typically, they terrify you at key moments. I've had experiences with them myself, and it took me up until recently to realize exactly what was going on with those. But as far as like trauma goes, most people, it's funny because most people, 99% of the people, and I actually believe it's 100% of the people, but some people are just in self-denial, were traumatized either sexually or physically before the age of 6. Whether they, the people who would deny this, or, you know, either they've suppressed it, or they're afraid that you'll judge them or whatever, but typically people who have been sexually molested or physically abused before the age of 6 are connected to the Roman Catholic Church or the Freemasonic Lodge. Typically their abusers are connected in that way. Is that your experience?
Well, I will say that there was a Mason in the family who began this, or maybe carried it on. That's exactly all I'm going to say about that. Exactly.
And this is what I've found, you know, sometimes I'll tell people that and they'll go, oh my God, how did you know that? Are you reading my mind? This is a universal thing. And we can get into the Freemasonic
My
Lodge
abuser
another
was not a Mason.
Right.
But my mother's abuser was.
Right.
And that's the reason she sought out and became involved with the abuser that abused me. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It creates especially, well, you could even talk about alien abductions. It typically is generational. Women especially, who have suffered quote-unquote alien abductions, will, if they pry long enough, they'll find out that their mother was too. It's generational. I mean, it's the same thing with, breeding a certain amount of stock. These entities that feed off of us, they're like cattle. I mean, they're like cattle ranchers. You get a thoroughbred, you want to keep breeding the thoroughbred because we're getting food off of that bloodline. So it is generational, and typically anybody, specifically because for people in the Freemasonic Lodge practice sex magic, sex black magic, and it typically starts before the age of 6 years old. And the reason that it starts before the age of 6 is you're aware of the chakra system, right?
Yep.
And I don't make any excuses for it anymore. Look, anybody who doesn't believe in a chakra, look in Gray's Anatomy. You have them. They're called ganglion nerves. The Bible teaches chakras. They just call them, the lamps, the lamps of the menorah, the 7 lamps, right? It's all the same thing. It's all talking about the same thing with different parables, different allegories. But the reason that trauma happens before 6 is because, a child, when they're born, they're connected to Source. They're still connected to the other side. Their crown is on, all the way from the root chakra to their crown chakra. But there's 5 bones before the coccyx bone, which is called the sacrum, and they don't fuse until after 6. So basically, your left and right hemisphere are still working together, and they're still connected to Source. Now, in black magic and black sex magic, vampirism, psychic vampirism, they believe that the most potent energy is sexual energy. And the most innocent energy is the energy of a child. So they will try to suck or drain this energy from a child before the age of 6, before that bone fuses. And what this trauma does, is it shuts off the electrical current, the flow, the circuit, from root chakra to crown chakra, from the right hemisphere into the left, which is male, masculine. So you can only use 10% of your left hemisphere. So they're basically they're causing this trauma to make you detach from spirit, from the divine, which is why most, if not all of us, were traumatized before the age of 6, to trap us in the ego, to trap us in the little self, to keep us divided from divinity, to keep us as weak byproducts of society and, get a job, pay your taxes, and whatever. That's why they've been doing this, and if we even go further than that, people say, well, no, I wasn't sexually abused before the age of 6. Okay, well, were you traumatized? Well, I don't think so. Well, okay, was your mother on her back when she gave birth to you? Because that right there will cause brain trauma. Why would you want to put a woman on her back when she's given birth?
Really?
Did your mother take any painkillers or anesthetics during childbirth? Was labor induced? Was there a cesarean section?
Were you circumcised?
Yeah, were you circumcised? All of these things cause trauma. So, okay, maybe you weren't molested or beaten before 6, but if any of these things are... So basically, in order for you to not have been traumatized in today's society, one, you can't have been sexually or physically abused before the age of 6. Your mother had to be standing up, probably in water with no anesthetics. You weren't circumcised. Unless you fit all those, you were traumatized before 6. Sorry. So, that's what and this is another reason you want to connect political activism, is because how are you going to reach people who aren't so spiritually minded that are going down to the hospital every day to produce wards of the state, and then they give them a birth certificate, right? Birth certificates are curses. The Vatican gets a copy of birth certificates. Basically, the Bible even talks about them trafficking in the souls of men. If you have a birth certificate or a marriage license, any kind of a contract, you may think it's just some government document. No, there's magic involved. There's magic involved with that stuff, and it works. And it doesn't matter if you believe in it or not. It works. So unless you fit the bill, of somebody whose mother gave natural birth, in the water, they didn't cut the umbilical cord until it came off, you weren't circumcised, you weren't molested, you weren't beaten before the age of 6, you were traumatized. Period. Get over it. Deal with it. All right? Now that you know that your predicament, where do you go from here? But so, yeah, trauma plays a huge, 9/11, and I talk about this on several shows, and I try to make the spiritual connection with people who are only into the 9/11 thing. But the 9/11 thing was a ceremony. It was a black magic ritual to traumatize the world.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
If you look at Freemasonry, and anybody who goes to my Facebook page, they'll see pictures of it. I like to use symbolism too, but not for the reasons they do. You have the 2 towers, or the 2 pillars of Freemasonry, Joachim and Boaz, and in the middle you have the altar. This represents the left and right hemisphere and the pineal gland. Well, the World Trade Center, most people don't realize. If you ever seen Fight Club, there's a scene where they blow up this round statue, this ball, in the middle of a square. That was actually in the middle of the World Trade Center. So you have 2 towers, and then in the middle you have the pineal gland, or the third eye. And then on 9/11, they blew it up. So this was a representation of trauma in the brain, and it affected the collective consciousness of the world. So, as above, so below, as within, so without. They're throwing it in your face.
Yes, they are. And they continue to, with bringing the ashes. The ashes of the victims are all of the victims all mixed together in one big pile of ashes. They brought them back to the site. That was their last ritual that they did. They brought the ashes back to the site. Why? Death cult ritual. Why else?
Exactly.
You don't return victims to the crash site. That's not an honoring. That's not a memorial. That's just evil.
Right.
And some of the families picked up on it, and they objected. But these ashes are in a special inner sanctum that the public is not allowed to go there. So who is allowed to go there? And what do they do when they go there? These are valid questions to ask.
Yeah, they are, and it all stems from magic, and you can call. People they dismiss magic, but magic is quantum physics. It's the manipulation of the world on a quantum level, and that's why it works. You don't have to believe in E equals MC square for an atomic bomb to blow your ass to the kingdom come. You don't even have to. You don't have to understand how atoms and molecules work for the science of it to work. So these guys, when they perform black magic rituals, it does have an effect. It has to have an effect on the quantum level. I would recommend anybody who wants to connect the dots between magic and science. If you're more atheistic or agnostic, get on YouTube and look up a documentary series called The Holographic Universe. There's also a book by Michael Talbot called The Holographic Universe that will open will expand your horizons as to why these control freaks believe in this stuff. It's not because it's some belief in, pie in the sky. It's because they know it's science. Magic is science. It is.
Yes, it absolutely is.
And, so it's time that we, as, more enlightened and spiritually minded people, take that science back and start using it, to reverse this stuff. One of the things I do, when I started practicing Buddhism, this really, really made the connection for me with the arrangement of rocks and stones and the power of vibration and intent. And one of the things I like to do is, I typically go on walks through the woods almost every day. I try to, but I'll grab me a handful of rocks in my right hand. Why the right hand? That's just me. Connecting it to femininity or whatever, but I'll listen to some really good, uplifting, happy music, and I'll think of positive thoughts and blessings, and I'll imagine that intent flowing from my heart to my mind, down my arm, into the stones. And then every now and then I'll toss a stone. And I kind of picture it like I'm sending ripples throughout the holographic universe of happiness, of wealth, of relief, of joy. And maybe somebody comes and picks up the stone, or even if they don't pick up the stone, the energy and the intent that I put into those stones, it sends ripples to the atoms around it like a river. This world that we interact with is like a river. It's like a lake. Everything that we do, not just physically, but with our thoughts and emotions, sends out ripples. It sends out energy. It sends out vibration, And for so long, we have been the victims of other people's ripples, and that's why they use things like 9/11 and these symbolic things, is because they're sending ripples to us, on this sea of karma. But we have the same power to emit ripples back. And we, as spiritually minded people, have a responsibility, once we know this, to start doing that, on whatever level that we can. And if it's praying over or touching stones and tossing them, and that's all you can do it. And as you start to do it, and the universe sees you using your power, it will give you more and more resources to use that same power for the betterment of humanity.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to celebrate wherever you're at on that. Too much we argue with each other about, well, no, that's not quite exactly right, and well, this, and I really like to connect with people. That's why I call my show The Bridge, is I like to meet people in the middle. I like to figure out where you're coming from, give you a little taste of where I'm coming from, and explore ideas and philosophies together. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I like about what you're doing is that you are connecting all of these things together, in that there is a multi-prong attack going on. So when you're talking about the trauma and the sacrum, and I have indeed had issues and problems with my sacrum for as long as I can remember. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that reinforces it is the poison in our food. So in my own personal journey, my gluten intolerance, which is really poison intolerance, because it's not the same gluten, and it's got Roundup poison all over it, and that's really what my body has been, or my immune system has been reacting to, is poison. But that particular poison reinforces the trauma of the sacral or sacrum area, because it messes our gut up, and so our guts leak, and get all, and this inflammation process starts, and it reinforces that that blockage, that first chakra blockage. So it's not only the trauma itself, but then it's the reinforcement of trauma. So it's not only the trauma of 9/11, but it's the reinforcement of it with the death ritual of bringing the victims back, multi-prong, several layers to it. And we're all figuring this out together. And so that's why what I like about what you're doing is you're bringing a bunch of different people with different ideas about what's going on in the world and how we can make it better. And you're figuring it out together. And I think that can only be a good thing.
Exactly. It's reverse engineering. Basically, my philosophy is, a lot of people who follow me and read the website or, their friends, they know I use a lot of symbology and a lot of symbols. But, what I'm doing is I'm taking what these control freaks have done for centuries, and I'm just reverse engineering it, for the intent of good, to free people's minds. Me and my dad would always go, and anybody who's, all of my readers know I talk about my dad a lot because, we are extremely close, even though he's crossed over. But one of the things when he was in his human body here, he'd have a problem with is he says, "Son, I believe that there's this almighty good God. I believe that. What I don't understand is why there's so much suffering in the world." And when he shuffled off his mortal coil, he took that with him, and it took me a while afterwards to answer that question for him. And it's that the reason there's suffering in the world is because there's suffering within. What happens in the body happens to the world.
And what happens to the world happens in the body.
Right. We're both interconnected. Both of us are interconnected. But, and I'm not bashing Alex Jones listeners or anything like that, but it's kind of like pre-programming. If I were to tell you, Kira, to look for the color red after we get off this interview, just look for the color red. Your subconscious mind's gonna, I've programmed you to do that, and we have been programmed by outside influences to look for negative things every day from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, and it keeps us in trauma. Okay, well, and I'm not saying ignore negative things. If you got weeds in your garden, there's weeds in your garden, pull them out. But what if we program ourselves to find beauty in the world every morning, or to program ourselves, to wake up in the morning and say, okay, how many people can I help today? In any way. Universe, God, Goddess, whatever. Send to me people that I can either give a piece of advice to, or give a hug to, or maybe give a couple dollars to, or take their groceries to their, whatever. Send people to me that I can help. And then you're on a completely different path. Instead of hiding in your bunker with storable foods and ammo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Start looking for positive. Start looking for beauty. Because that is what the whole control system doesn't want us to do.
I could not agree more. I think that's a great place for us to leave it here tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Let's kick this out with a victory song.
All right. Thank you, Kira.
You
pahacha eyuha natampelo weo la kota okshila he tinkacha eyuha natampe tikashilaya pitawa pahacha eyuha natampelo weo la kota okshila Tikashelaya pitawa pahacha eyuha